This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Arthur Gasparo, Nantucket Airport Commission Chairman. Welcome to the January 10th, 2023 Airport Commission meeting. This open meeting is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. As a preliminary matter, we have all of our commissioners in attendance except for Ms. Topham, and I will acknowledge her if and when I see her join the meeting. This meeting is being conducted by video conference via the Zoom app. Meeting will be aired at a later time on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating by video conference, and please be careful not to share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. I'll introduce each speaker on the agenda and then go down and then open it up to members. Please hold until your name is called. If members wish to engage conversation with other members, please do through the chair. For items with public comment, I'll forward public comment to the people who have joined via Zoom. And those wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. Full names not used do not be allowed to participate in the discussion, and the Commission reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use a full name or acts inappropriately. And finally, each vote in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And also welcome Ms. Topham.
Hello there.
And with that, we'll turn to the first item on the agenda. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns with the agenda as published?
No.
Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. And we have the draft minutes, which are still pending from the 13th. We'll handle those at the next meeting. We have to ratify two warrants, one from December 21st, 2022, and one from January 4th of 2023. Are there any questions or comments concerning those warrants? And if not, is there a motion to ratify them?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. We'll now turn to public comment for any items that are not otherwise on the agenda. Please feel free to raise your virtual hand or speak up, and I will do my best to acknowledge you. Hearing none, we will move on to a public hearing to consider proposed revisions to the airport's rates and charges. And I have a short preliminary statement to read for that. So welcome. This evening, we're holding a public hearing on proposed changes to the Nantucket Memorial Airport rates and charges. The Nantucket Memorial Airport routinely reviews and updates the rates and charges assessed to airport users. The goal in establishing the fees is to provide fair and reasonable rates charged on an equitable basis to recover the costs associated with the operation and maintenance of the airport. The airport faces capital improvement needs in the next 5 to 10 years. Infrastructure is aging. The purchasing power of airport improvement program grant funding is decreasing. The pace of inflation has gained national attention, and the cost to maintain and attract qualified personnel have increased. In order to maintain economic sustainability, where direct airport users bear the cost for operating the airport instead of the taxpayers, a carefully managed rates and charges structure is essential to recover costs, pay for operations, and plan for future infrastructure repairs. The current revision proposes an across-the-board approach to provide a consistent percentage increase to major revenue categories to maintain revenue commensurate with expenses. Despite these expenses, historical and proposed revisions to aeronautical rates remain lower than industry comparable airports and competitive for non-hub and small hub commercial service airports. Highlights of the proposed revisions include setting an across-the-board 5% increase to landing, ramp, tie-down, and hangar fees, increasing the signatory exemption consistent with past philosophical practice for valuing year-round service, defining the law enforcement officer, known as LEO reimbursement method, increased penalties for operating without an agreement, increase additional optional service fees, and for most categories, as soon as practicable, the TNC fee. And with that, we will turn to a discussion from staff and the commission, and then we will open it up to comments from the public. And with that, Mr. Carberg, we'll turn it over to you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am going to share my screen to a red line version of rates and charges. Items called out in red are changes from the currently in force rates and charges. In the last commission meeting, I gave the commissioners a primer on the changes we were making with a greater degree of specificity to entertain commission feedback before we arrived at a final rates and charges for consideration in the public hearing. Well, I'm scrolling now to here are my comments. There was a conversation specifically for FBO users related to our small general aviation user ramp fee exemption with the purchase of fuel. I was asked to research and provide a little bit more data, which I have. The comment from the commission was, should we really waive the purchase of the waiver of the ramp fee, the $10 ramp fee with the purchase of 10 gallons of fuel? When I went back into the data, I pulled 2 months worth of data. I pulled July and October for a range. And what I found was in our busy month in July, we had 566 transient GA arriving aircraft under 6,000 pounds that generated $5,660 in a ramp fee. 254 of these arrivals took fuel in an amount that would waive the ramp fee. The waiver was about $2,500 for our peak month. I think it's consistent with the commission's comments about being a GA-friendly airport that we continue the ramp fee program, and I have highlighted it for discussion, but I have removed the red line version of the text here in red. It's a small fee waiver for encouraging, owner, operator, pilot class to come to Nantucket. They take fuel, they likely take transportation into town, buy a meal. This is probably something I believe we can keep our business community. So that's the option that I bring forward. Other options for the commission are to accept the deletion or increase the fuel purchase to a higher amount, 15 or 20 gallons. Those would all be well within your discretion. Otherwise, the rates in front of you reflect what the chairman mentioned in his introductory remarks. We are forecasting, or we are proposing an increase to landing fees, ramp fees, RON fees, and at 5%, as well as to our full set of hangar, tie down, and T-hangar rates. With that, it's all right with you, Mr. Chair, I will keep this document up, shared, and I have seen a number of our users signed into the Zoom meeting. I don't know I haven't received written comment, but we might have verbal comments to be shared by our user group.
Thank you, Mr. Carberg. First, do any commission members have any specific comments? You also will hear from the public, and then have another chance to further discuss what we hear and what's proposed. But I would like to open up to the commission if there's any questions, comments, or concerns with the proposal as outlined. Mr. Buscarin.
Yes, I'd be in favor of Mr. Carberg's recommendation. Waive the fee for a purchase of 10 gallons of fuel. I think it's nice to be able to come out to Nantucket and not be whacked with a fee that you probably may not expect. So I think that's a modest thing to do, and I think we ought to do it.
Thank you. Any other commissioners before we open it up to the public? I can't see. Okay. Okay, seeing none, members of the public, you could either raise your virtual hand or maybe if we could stop the screen share momentarily, Mr. Carberg, I could more easily see the participants. Thank you. There is the opportunity to use the hand raise, or you can wave at me through the video camera if you have any comments that you would like to make. This is an open public hearing, and we certainly welcome your input. Okay. Seeing or hearing none, commissioners, any further comments, questions or concerns with the proposed changes to the rates and charges? Mr. Ferrera.
Hi, thank you
Floor is
very
yours.
much. Thank you very much. Chuck Ferrara with Cape Air. Thanks for the opportunity to give some feedback on this. Just two comments. One would be a request for a consideration of the methodology assessing the cost of the LEO at the airport to more accurately reflect those who are beneficiaries of the LEO's presence. As I understand it right now, the LEO costs are being borne by the airlines exclusively. So I would request that perhaps we take a look at, or the commission takes a look at, the fact that other non-airline tenants are also benefiting from the LEO presence at the terminal, and perhaps should be included in the cost of providing that LEO service at the terminal. Also, as a side, want to applaud the airport's leadership in working with TSA to get approval for the response time setup and approval, so that in the off season we're not burdening either law enforcement or the users for charges that can run up quite easily quickly. So thank you for that. Glad we were able to get that done in the response time, but I do think it's worth taking a look at how that cost is spread out over not just the airline users. Should I stop there or
No, please, we'll take all your comments and then we will digest and discuss them.
Okay. The other comment would be the noise abatement procedures that are in place are something that Cape Air has been very vigilant about and continues to observe. And I think that that's been a good thing for the community, for the airport community, and for the residents of Nantucket. We certainly want to continue that. In partnership, the airport has offered a reduction in landing fees to compensate for the additional fuel burn and time that's taken by doing these noise abatement procedures. In this environment of increased costs, which we're all experiencing, both fuel and in our case also salaries for crew and time and wear and tear on engines, we would like to review the current percentage that's offered for abiding by noise abatement procedures. It's not something that has to be done immediately, but if something we can maybe take a look at in partnership with the airport and the commission, that would be much appreciated. I need to do some more homework on our end to kind of give you an honest assessment of what, whether or not we're coming out, even, the current methodology is compensating for the additional costs. So I don't have that for this evening, but I can provide that, and maybe we can have that discussion too. I think that's all that I'd like to bring up, and I thank you again for the opportunity to give these comments.
Certainly, and thank you for taking the time and all that Cape Air does service in our community. We certainly appreciate you.
You bet.
So commissioners, we're certainly open to discussion on the comments. I may first turn it over to, if I may, Mr. Carberg or Mr. Rafter, if you had any comments particular towards the or thoughts towards the comments we've heard regarding the LEO allocations.
Sure. So regarding the LEO allocations, I think Mr. Ferrara, you may not know, but in his role for Cape Air, he oversees a number of stations and their agreements. in the network. So I think it's a good observation. And I think there is a philosophical item at the commission's discretion. At a staff level, we've chosen to assign full LEO recovery costs to the airlines, but the officer on duty certainly responds to issues in the parking lot or the restaurant or on the general aviation grant. It's something I wouldn't have an answer for this adoption or this meeting on how I'm giving options for the commission to consider a different framework for charges, but different airports run the gamut of assigning costs to specific subgroups of airlines, larger groups of airlines, or larger groups of users. There's a range of approaches we could implement.
Thank you. But no specific, it would take more work, I presume, to try to get that granular in what those alternatives might be. And might there be also, I think, for discussion, consideration that, of course, most of the users are ultimately, ending up on one of the airlines as well, that, the police presence are really benefiting one and the same, essentially. I mean, I understand there's the restaurant, but for the most part, it seems to me that, if we were to further break it down, in general, it's the users of the airlines that are receiving the benefit. So again, I'm not sure how else you would further refine that, but it does seem to me that the cost recovery methodology seems appropriate.
Isn't it the reason it would be allocated to airlines is because it's required by TSA because of the commercial airlines, correct? Is that
correct? The specific requirements is for it doesn't tie necessarily with the FAA regulations, but I believe it's for airlines operating aircraft. 62 seats or more requires the on-site response for LEO services. I think if we were, I'm sorry, Andrea, I can't remember the specific class of airports. A different class would require the remote on-site or a remote response. So, at its tying it specifically to the regulations would shrink the user group to just seasonal airlines that operate at the airport. I think it is a matter of philosophy. My approach, or the staff recommendation, is what's here in the rates and charges. That doesn't mean it isn't something we could review. One thing I've learned from Tom is we always want to have a basis that is defined or divined from operations. So we could look at, for example, over the next few months, our list of incident reports and see where the LEOs have responded. What was the nature of those incidents? Were they passengers just in different parts of the airport, or were they members of the public? If it was at a car rental counter, was that customer originating from the airport, or did they come on a ferry and rent a car from the airport? But that might confirm or deny suspicions about a broader impact of users on the LEO resource. So I caution, I'd like to take if we review it, I'd like to take sort of more of a long-term view. It could result in maybe we decide not to assess a fee or a full fee, but I think we would still want these categories or this language adopted as shown in the rates and charges. I know that's a very long answer, but I was thinking as I was speaking.
I think that makes sense. Mr. Buscarin.
I think from a logical point of view, Cape Air seems to have had made a point here. If we were not required to have legal services for, airplanes that are coming in here with 9 passengers or less, it seems to me that if that's all we had, we wouldn't be required to have a cop on site. we might choose to want to do that. We might consider a two-tier fee schedule with charging people like Cape Air or Southern less money than airlines. Having the airline there with a larger number of passengers is we're required to have law enforcement. So I'm just throwing that in.
I think there's more to think about on that, or at least to look into.
Mhm.
Good point.
Could you clarify for me, Mr. Carberg? I just heard you say, I think that it's the requirement for Leo is tied to the capacity of the particular aircraft, but my recollection, and I could be mashing things together a little bit, that it was related to service to other secure airports.
I believe, and I'm going to look for Tom to correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that my statement was accurate. The remote on-site response would be adequate for aircraft operating under the 62 or 63 seats. I don't recall exactly, but moving into the category 63 seats above requires the local on-site TSA support, and that's pulling from the 14 CFR Part 49 regulations. Yeah.
You're right.
That's correct, and that's what TSA had agreed to. They said if, we did have air carrier service year round, we would be required to have it on site, but it's allowed to be remote because of the smaller aircraft.
But we still would need an agreement that would have a cost associated with it with the local Leo, even for the remote service, correct? For the on-call component.
Correct. We have in essence what are two agreements. We have a rate and an
Right.
agreement that predated the more recent staffing issue. And then on top of that agreement, we had a detail rate. And what we're assessing now is the detail rate, which was in excess of our established ongoing agreement. So we continue to bear the costs of the existing Leo agreement that predated this summer that we build back through our space charges. That's how that has been associated. The fee that we're proposing here is to build back that excess detail cost through the 80-20 split, which ends up being around, I'm sorry, I don't have the sheet in front of me, was around an extra $50,000 or $60,000 for supporting that detail.
And Mr. Ferrer, if I may, and you don't have to answer this to question back to you, because I'm certainly welcome the feedback and input. Would you have a suggested alternative structure?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it does merit more discussion. I guess just from a as Noah says, a philosophical perspective, those who benefit from the service should also contribute to the cost of the service. So from my perspective, it's the LEOs are going to respond to any event on airport, and all of the users benefit that service. There are regulatory requirements, right, that have to do with just the airline operations that require LEO presence either on site or remote. I assume the costs for the service on site are higher than the response time costs. By response time, I mean not having them on site, right? They agree to respond within X number of minutes of an event. So I think I don't know who all of the airport tenants are, but you've got other operations at the airport that are not necessarily connected to aviation flyers. I mean, forgive me for this, 63 airports now, I tend to forget, but are there car rental options in Nantucket other than at the airport?
Yes.
Okay, so someone doesn't have to go to the airport to rent a car.
No.
Okay, and if people come, do people come to the airport just to go to the restaurant?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, and I don't know what the private traffic is paying toward the presence of an LEO or if they have an incident in your parking lot, or, stuff like that. Look, it's merely a question to take a look. I don't think I'm not banging on the table here. I'm just saying, I think it is an area to take a look at whether or not the cost is equitably assessed by all of those who benefit from the service. And I think probably we should do, and I can partner with Noah outside of this to do some more pen to paper about, well, I think it's a good idea. How many times have the LEOs been called to respond to, non-airline passenger events? And see if we can't just divide that out a little more equitably.
Fair enough. We certainly, I think, would
Yeah.
welcome that assistance and input.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public that wish to comment on the draft rates and charges? Seeing none, I will close the hearing on public hearing and open the matter up to deliberation by the commission. Commissioners, any other comments or proposed changes? Mr. Marks.
Yeah, just referring back to the whole Leo thing is it seems to me that I don't disagree with the gentleman from Cape Air there. Whatever the requirement of the Leo is, meaning why they would be there, I feel should bear that expense, right? Like, why would you charge the restaurant because JetBlue is supposed to have the Leo there? That's kind of my thinking, right? And if the on-site Leo isn't required for Cape Air to operate, then maybe his rate should be less. And I don't know if it is or isn't, because I don't have that information, but you know what I'm saying? I think it should be equitable based on the requirement of the Leo as to who should pay for him to be there. If Cape Air, if he has to be there for Cape Air, then in what capacity is that? And then that proportion should be assessed, not, you know what I mean? Just because we have a Leo there in the summertime because JetBlue's there over 62 seats, then I don't feel he should have to pay for that either, is to his point. It should be more, I think it should be equitably borne upon the people that are requiring them to be part of it, to be there, the Leo. Sorry.
Right. I agree with you, Phil. Like, I think we have to look at it and see how it's equitably calculated.
Mr. Carberg.
At your discretion, Mr. Chair, I just pulled the table that I have to assign the cost based on the 80-20 split. I could share that.
Yes, please.
Is everyone, okay, good. Everyone should be seeing
good.
this table. The cost requirement that we're billing out for the current Leo, the Access Leo charges $49,000 at a fixed rate of 20%. So $10,000, 20% billed proportionally to each airline. 80% of the costs are billed based off of their share of enplanements for the period. So each airline is looking at paying both the same fixed cost plus their passenger dependent variable costs, with the total costs in the SPAR column. So this is the order of magnitude of the charges. We are looking for one potential just option for the commission. We do have a history of waiving fees for our signatory carriers. We wouldn't add them on to the bill for the remaining carriers, but we could think about waiving a portion, either the fixed or the passenger dependent portion of those Leo fees. For example, during this calendar year, Cape Air and Southern Airways were both signatory carriers. We could consider waiving the passenger requirements for each of $5,500 and $800 respectively.
Thank you. Commissioners, thoughts on the information we were just provided? I can't see, I'm sorry here. Okay, I got everybody now. Mr. Marks.
So what you're saying though is that they would pay the $1,600 because that's just what the cost of having, let's say, argue the Leo on call would be, and then perhaps waive the other amount because that's really required. That cost is required relative to the fact that the police officer has to be on site because of the larger aircraft. Would that be a fair assessment?
Not exactly. I'd say it's everyone paying a share for the summer because I do think everyone benefits in the summer from the on-airport Leo presence. But I think it's an acknowledgement that the airport benefits more from year-round signatory service to maintain a connection to the national system. That's the way I would phrase it.
Would we have a Leo on site if we were not required to have one?
That is a very good question. I think that's also I think that's also a law enforcement and a management question for the airport. I think it brings benefit to the airport. Even if not required, it's a very helpful item to have.
I think in the summertime for sure, you know, just the amount of people coming through there, you know, I would from an operations and management perspective be very supportive of having that, you know, just for everybody's general safety and well-being, if you will. So I had one thought, which I do like, you know, the option that was presented with respect to signatory users. And I'm wondering if we were to amend the, you know, or consider an amendment to the proposed rates and charges on item J, which would essentially exempt signatory users from the 80% share. Is that what essentially you were suggesting, Mr. Carberg?
Yes, that was my suggestion.
So I could just do a quick screen share and I just edited what we have and at least have that for discussion. Because I do think it's important as a public hearing, whether or not we make this change or adopt it and take future you know, take it under future advisement, that that's the purpose of having this this hearing. So I did this in blue. And I welcome comment from all commissioners as well as Mr. Carberg or Mr. Rafter. Would this make sense? So you see my screen?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if you've seen it, but Amira does have her hand up. Just want to make sure you're aware of that.
Okay. We did close the public hearing, but I guess if we're proposing changes, we may be willing to take that. But was this the kind of, would this language satisfy what you accomplished, what you had suggested, Mr. Carberg?
I have one suggested change on the language. I would suggest we stay with the language that would read the 80% portion is waived for signatory terminal users. That would match our language in other waived fee categories.
80% share is, I'm sorry, waived?
Waived for signatory terminal users. That's good, thank you.
So now would that mean that then, okay, so they're exempt, so we would take the percentage, let's see, so they're not part of it, then do the rest of them share?
The remainder.
Okay, the remainder, so they're pulled out of that pot of money, and then the others make up for it. Is that how it?
Incorrect. So the to use the actual numbers, if this language that the chairman had proposed is adopted, the airport is just waiving the fee collection for the $5,562 passenger requirement for Cape Air and the $858 passenger requirement for Southern Airways. Those numbers are not then added into the 80% totals for the remaining airlines. So it's the airport who doesn't recover that amount of money. That amount of money is not assessed to the remaining airlines. It does not input.
So that's it. Okay, so that's the airports covering
Yep.
that.
Oh,
That would be my recommendation based off of at least what I perceive as the industry standard for fee waivers.
I would have thought, I could see your point if that's an industry standard, but I would have thought that your total is still your total and it would be divided and recovered upon amongst the users who are assessed.
But unfortunately, that would not be my preference. The waiver of the fee would come at the expense of the airports.
I understand. I appreciate that clarification, as well. So I think for I really drafted this for, for consideration and discussion. There would need to be a motion to, I think, adopt with the change or adopt without the change. And it could be for future consideration as well. I'm going to stop sharing just so that I can see. But I did think that was worthy of at least having the discussion in response to comments that we received. We did close the public hearing, but this is a change that's being discussed, and I do see that there is a hand up. So if it's okay with the commission, I will accept that comment, and then we can come back. So Ms. Trebinek, I believe it is.
A valiant effort. Thank you. Thank you for making the exception to take my comment. Relative to this change, and thinking about industry standard, one thing that we see and might achieve the goal that NOAA was aiming toward instead was perhaps removing the 20% portion of it and doing an allocation just based on user on employments, and maybe having an allocation to the point that Chuck had noted, and maybe a set allocation for other restaurants or other users. In an airport, we see it purely on a per employment fee. And so just wanted to entertain that. Also, I was under the impression that maybe it was going to be a takeaway that Chuck and NOAA might, work through on a better way to handle it, but wanted to put that on the table. And then, well, the other items I can leave as a follow-up for basically to understand a cost per employment, but and the comparison between signatory and not, and the impacts to us. But understand the need. Just wanted to mention that the industry standard, propose an alternate for consideration, and that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly appreciate your input. And to that point, to the commission, what I would say is, the suggested language is really just for discussion, because I think this is so important as a part of the public hearing. It may be that a better course of action is to adopt the rates and charges as drafted and have a goal of over the next year, or an action item for further study and refinement. I leave that to the commission's discretion, but I thought it would be good to have alternatives for discussion in response. Mr. Buscarin.
Yeah, my position would be we approve the rates and charges as NOAA put them originally, and not look at any amendment reducing charges for signatory airlines because I don't want to see the airport losing income.
Yes, I think we ought to, can we just have a month to go over different options, and maybe you and Mr. Ferrera could have a discussion, Noah, or work out different options maybe, and we revisit that portion next meeting?
Mr. Carberg, what is, the implications to the airport of holding this open and further discussing it at the February meeting with perhaps an alternate structure? And we certainly would, I think if we did that, we would reopen the public hearing to be sure, or essentially continue the public hearing in case there is further, input or comments on a new draft.
Thinking off the cuff, that I might ask Boyana to opine as well. I believe we can do it, but I think I would recommend that we adopt all changes accepting this issue, so staff can move forward with preparing the airline leases and the deck pages of the pro formas to distribute to the airlines, begin that review process so we could have them back with plenty of time for the air carrier season. So I believe we would procedurally, we would keep the public hearing open, but limit it to just the item under consideration.
I'm okay with that. Everybody
Mhm.
else?
I am.
So we would need a motion to that effect, please.
So moved.
Second.
So let's just clarify a little bit, because for our minute taker, I think
I'm-
the motion would be to adopt and please correct me if I don't have your motion as you intend. The motion would be to adopt the rates and charges as published, exempting the item J, is it 1J? Item 1J for airport law enforcement services, which would be continued for discussion at the February meeting. Is that your motion?
So moved.
And is there a second? All right, motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And thank you to all members of the public who attended and participated. We welcome and value it. Moving on to pending leases and contracts set forth on Exhibit 1. Mr. Carberg.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have two items. I will take them individually. We have the owner's project management scope of work with CHA Consulting for the crew quarters. The owner's project manager is a required function for vertical construction projects over a certain threshold. We've worked with CHA diligently on the scope, and we believe it's commensurate with the level of effort needed on this project. We also have the scope with the same company for terminal optimization for $404,000. This derives from the same requirement previously mentioned. Both of these are a guaranteed maximum price. For the terminal optimization specifically, if we don't receive funding and or elect not to go forward with this project after execution, we don't pay for all of the services invoiced on here. We pay for the services accumulated to date. So I did want to emphasize that, since this is a project where funding is not guaranteed and funding is competitive.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns with respect to the two pending contracts? If not, is there a motion to approve the two contracts with CHA Consulting?
So moved.
And seconded?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Moving on to pending matters. We have the capital approval process home rule petition, Mr. Carberg.
Yeah, so good news on House Bill 3792. It moved very quickly before Christmas break. It was adopted by both chambers of the House and signed by the governor. Our next step internally as staff is to review this with council. It is 3 years old since it was drafted and then amended, and we wanted to refine procedurally how we interact with select board and commissions and establish that draft internal working process. So we will report back to you in February with that.
Sounds good. Any questions on that, commissioners? PFAS update, please.
So you have a activity table report update in your packet. We are still holding at 540 samples taken from 80 individual wells. Regarding task order PN11 Amendment 2, the status items are the same as last month. Work is ongoing with the down gradient property status and the potentially productive aquifer exclusion. We are expecting draft documents for internal review in late February. For Amendment 3, sampling results are delayed. Sampling labs are experiencing a national backlog just due to interest in PFAS. Sorry about that. Interest in PFAS, but those samples will be received. They'll remain good in storage, and we will get that data when it's available. We have a resident on Mattoxam Valley Road. We've been monitoring their residents throughout cycles. They've been below but near 20 parts per trillion. That was exceeded, and we will connect that home. There's nothing to do right now. The home is vacant and winterized, and we will take steps to make that connection this winter and spring. Airport gas stormwater improvements are complete, and we are waiting on as-built.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding to the PFAS investigation? Please keep us posted. Thank you. We have next item on the agenda is to ratify the MassDOT Grant Award AIP 81 for the relocation of taxiway G and sign and mark taxi lane F and taxiway C, the state share of which is $304,004.11. Is there such a motion to ratify that grant award?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
aye,
Mr. Buscarin.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. And moving us on to finance, we have our revised operating budget for fiscal year 24. Mr. Carberg.
I don't have many updates. Jamie is also present to answer any questions. I was going to give a brief overview, and then I think we're looking for your motion to adopt or approve the budget. The minor changes that are in place and are reflected in this version are a small increase to commercial ramp revenue, a decrease in payroll consistent with recent staffing changes, and a corresponding increase to our expense categories for professional services and vehicle and equipment maintenance. Specifically, our maintenance mechanic position is still unfilled, and we are anticipating contract services for our ARC equipment required maintenance. So I would turn and that is all I have for you for introduction of the budget. I think Jamie and I would be happy to answer questions.
I thought I would just put this up. So we have all the information in our packet. I will say that having gone through it, and as typical with years past, I found Ms. Hansberry's comments to all the line items to have preempted questions that I may have otherwise had, and very helpful. I'm happy to scroll through or take any questions, comments that anyone may have for Mr. Carberg or Ms. Hansberry. or a motion to adopt the budget as drafted.
Make a motion to adopt the budget as drafted.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin.
Aye.
And Chair votes aye. Thank you all very much, staff, all of your combined effort
Mhm.
that went into this. It's much appreciated. And with that, we will move on to our new manager's report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Tom's provided me with a great template. I just have a couple tweaks in my delivery for my own organizational and management. And that's start with AIP projects. For Taxiway Echo, no updates. For the airport master plan, our next step is to have an aerial survey of the airfield completed. And we're working on membership for our technical advisory committee with our consultants. For the geometry project, we have a January 18th stakeholder meeting on the books to address non-standard conditions. The ones that have been discovered so far are relatively minor, and we'll discuss some options for addressing them. For Taxiway Golf, you have accepted the Mass DOT grant award. The reimbursable agreement is in place with the DOT as well. This relates to working with air traffic to mitigate the fiber optic cable that passes under that area that leads to the ASR radar in the Matagasham Valley Road area. So that's an important item to keep track of. The HVAC project in the terminal is nearing substantial completion. We're waiting to confirm some training materials on system use, waiting to confirm that those have been received before we move on with that project. The Southwest Ramp expansion is a future AIP project. It's upcoming, so I want to track that one closely. We are submitting a grant application with the May 1st deadline that will be based on our engineer's estimate. Typically, we like to provide these with bid estimates. But since that task order is not in yet, we still need to complete design. We will put in an amended application in July following a receipt of bids. The design meeting that is upcoming, I don't have a date on that yet, but we will be considering the ops plan that Mr. Harriman presented to you last month as a basis for some of the form for the design elements. For runway 624, we have a large funding project associated with this work in calendar 2026. The amount to fund that project is more than the entire New England region receives in a given year. So that's some concern. It ends up being a Washington office level concern. So we will just continue to defend the need for the project. The pavement reaching its useful life, the end of its useful life, and the fact that construction costs on Nantucket for a major project are high. We are requesting an increase in our ARC truck index for fiscal year 2025, I believe. We have notified the FAA regarding JetBlue's scheduled service increase next year. They intend to fly the Airbus 220 into Nantucket, and by the following year, we will be required, we believe, to meet a C index. So this is one of the formal steps for requesting an index change, to have two pieces of equipment that collectively meet the index C requirements. We have reached out through our consultant to the FAA. In light of recent storms, we want to move the South Shore fencing project from our capital improvement plan up. There isn't any immediate danger, but we have gone through the work of proactively permitting moving the fence inland with the Conservation Commission and with Natural Heritage. It would be a shame to, in my opinion, to put it off any longer and see that fence fall into the ocean when it is avoidable. So when we have an updated project list, I will inform the commission regarding that. Regarding the crew quarters, thank you for the scope approval. We'll be working with our consultant and the OPM on the MJ scope and fee with coastal engineering, reviewing the site plan and defending our project up and through annual town meeting. I've been attending meetings as part of the town of Nantucket Surfside Area Water and Transportation Group. There are 2 upcoming projects I wanted to inform you about. The first is a bike path creation and potential future roadway changes on Monahanset and Okaraw. It's a good project. The town has asked for our support to allow the use of a very small amount of airport land abutting the road for a future bike path. It's a good project, but you should expect to see this come back to the commission as a future license agreement for your review and potential adoption. The second project is the future town water main west of the airport, or the town water main extension. They will be looking for 2 takeoff points or 2 access points to the water main on airport property. I've taken a look at it. I believe our existing intramunicipal agreement is sufficient. It really just requires notification by Wanacomb Water Company and then working with airport staff to allow the physical on-site excavation and access to tee into that water main. For hangar development, the Hagedorn hangar is substantially complete. They did a good job. And we are looking to go forward with McFarland Johnson on 2 projects. The first is a lightning arrestor project for the outdoor boarding area and the fuel farm. It's a mix of two items. The first phase is a quick and easy fix, putting in inline circuits and fuses or upgrading the ones that are existing. The second is more involved and looks at a better understanding of soil potential and conductivity. For some reason, the existing lightning grounding systems in place just don't seem to be adequate for the recent storms that we've experienced. And our consultant thinks soil potential or the difference in electrical conductivity within the ground might be a reason for that and might require a change. Tom has been working on a stranded passenger plan in conjunction with Liz Holland at the High Line. I characterize it as an interagency plan where the airport would have resources available that complement our family and assistance program, but also allow for a process for coordinating for a major on-island transportation issue, such as what was experienced for Winter Stroll. So we can work collaboratively with town agencies. For RFP and bid status, RFPs for bunker 60 and 66 are out on the street. Responses are due in by 2 p.m. tomorrow. Future lots L and K, which are portions behind the existing Toscana and Victor leaseholds. We intend to bring a minor scope of work amendment with our environmental consultant, just to codify the permitting required for these. But in the long run, the benefit to the airport and financial return for renting this land far exceeds these costs, which will be minor for the amendment. It's also promoting local business community. And then our on-call planning and engineering contracts, it's been 3 years already, and these are due up in June. So the new 3-year contracts for on-call planning and engineering are available to the public beginning tomorrow, with proposals due in February. Similar to last year, I believe we're going to reach out to the commission for a representative on the evaluation and selection of those firms. For operations updates, we had a sprinkler head freeze on December 26th. It was noticed immediately by operations staff, addressed by maintenance staff, and repaired quickly by a contractor. Total cost of about $5,000. I wanted to note staff response there. It was exemplary. Our ecological mowing is underway. We are in the process of managing 70 acres of mixed scrub oak in coastal heathlands on airport through a system of ecological mowing. We do a very great job. I call it, Our ecological mowing and our historical application of techniques compatible with airport operations have resulted in some great habitat. And this is recognized by the ecological community. We're developing our ARP truck service maintenance plan. We've received a large order of new radios. It represents a new equipment upgrade from for a previous capital project. We will be sending 2 staff members to ARP training this winter. December fuel sales are up. It was a busy stroll month. We've received our initial steamship ferry reservation schedule for summer fuel deliveries. I received an initial briefing from World Fuel Service. It looks positive. I want to recognize that the Steamship Authority, it's clear that they took a good look at what our demands are and stage this by weeks of the summer. We'll review and see if we need any tweaks. Just today, I received a request from the Nantucket Historical Association for loan of the PBA model aircraft that hangs above non-sterile departures for a summer program. I will be reviewing that and responding accordingly. I'll reach out to see if the commission would like to retain approval of any potential loan agreements or if they would like staff to handle this. For statistics. Beg your pardon while I bring up the packet. Okay, November operations are down nearly 12% on the year. November operations are down 12% for both November and for the year. This is driven by continued losses in the Hyannis market. Southwest ramp operations were down 5% for November. This is reflecting October, but they were down 5% for November, but still up. And this is attributable to economic concerns or general statistical noise. I'm not entirely sure which. Passenger enplanements are down 36% for the month, but still up 3.5% for the year, driven by our summer volumes. This decline has been driven by 2 factors, which is Southern Air not operating this fall and reductions in Cape Air's operating schedule. Cape Air, Boston market is down 13% over last November. Hyannis is down significantly at 83%. Jet A sales are up 4.3% for November and up 16% for December. Avgas was down 9.4% for November and up 9% for December. Freight was down 38% for November and year-to-date is down 6%, with the largest decline coming from FedEx. And we received 2 noise complaints for November. I'm sharing one additional slide that I believe you had as a handout. This is a sales graph or an uplift graph that we keep for our fuel uplift. And I wanted to bring it up because I wanted to show a sort of a second analysis of some of the statistics you see and what it means, what we think it means for the airport and airport operations. What I'm showing is our cumulative Jet A uplift over the calendar year from 2016 to the current close of 2022. 2016 is this blue line, and historically, we've experienced a very consistent, very dependable year-over-year growth in fuel. This was fairly easy to accommodate logistically and operationally at the airport. From 2016 to 2017 to 2018 to 2019. And even the COVID year recovered fairly quickly, defying all expectations for Nantucket. However, starting in 2021, we saw a huge jump in Jet A uplift that never relented as we thought into 2022. It's both been a volume issue, but also a seasonal concern. You can track that the jump began early in the season, at a time where we weren't really used to seeing levels of activity. And if you look at the different rate of growth in the lines, it continued into the shoulder season. This volume increase has been a system level stressor. Everything has been affected, from fuel supply to the Boston terminal, trucker availability. The steamship has had few but impactful boat issues, and we've had few but impactful issues with items like our fuel farm strike. We work daily on coordinated logistics, not only among staff, but among steamship authority as well. The way I'd like to put it, though, living on an island, there are many links in a supply chain. And while we hope that continued disruption and continued difficulty isn't part of our future picture, one failure in one link of the chain has a compounding effect for Nantucket and for the island. And currently, I just looked at our stats. 2023, because it's low, isn't showing yet. We are up at least January to date, currently, despite the threat of a recessionary environment. So we're looking forward to seeing what 2023 holds, and we will address it with the same dedication and humor that we have the past 2 years. For a personnel report, we have a new staff person who has started. Laura Scott has accepted the receptionist position and started on January 3rd. Please welcome her if you've not yet had the opportunity. We're also looking to refill the administrative assistant position, and we'll be releasing that shortly. We are advertising internally to fill the operations supervisor position that will become vacant with Mr. Buckley's retirement. We think we have a good internal candidate pool, and that is in progress. We're also in the process of filling a maintenance position. We're working aggressively for a candidate for the open, to attract candidates for the open maintenance mechanic position. We are also opening an external search for a M1 position, and we believe we have a good lead for that position as well. We received notice of a staff resignation from operations specialist Joanna Rodriguez. She'll be leaving the airport for on-island private sector work. We wish her the best. She was a diligent and hardworking employee for us. Do want to note this does put pressure on our ARC coverage and ops staffing for the summer. Backfilling her position and Mr. Buckley's position will be a priority for us as well. We've also discussed internally a way to increase our attraction and advertisement for our seasonal component. Typically, we would like to have 22 seasonal staff members on board. Last year, we had 11. We're off to a slow start this year. So we have discussed internally enhanced advertising strategies, as well as some bonus and attraction items. However, we can only do so much without devaluing our full-time personnel pay rates. And that concludes my report.
Well
you,
done, Noah.
Thank you, Mr. Cowberg. Does anybody have any questions or comments related to Mr. Cowberg's report? Hearing none, are there any commissioners' comments for items that weren't on the agenda?
No.
Hearing none, any further public comment? Seeing none, I would entertain an executive session, a motion to go into executive session per general law, chapter 38, section 21A, to review the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda for review and possible release. Clause 3, discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, where the chair has determined an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Airport Commission. And item C, clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Walsh, where the chair has determined an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission, not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second,
Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you all for attending.